This cold billionaire went through 7 different nannies, firing each one when they couldn't fix his silent, non-verbal son. No one lasted long, no one got through. Until one day, a quiet maid walked into their mansion with nothing but patience and a few hand puppets, and everything changed. Because after years of silence, the boy looked up, smiled, and said his very first word, not to his father, not to a doctor, but to her. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. It was raining outside when Nathan Cole's life changed forever. At the hospital, he was waiting in the hallway, just outside the room where his wife, Amelia, was giving birth. The fluorescent lights above him were bright and cold, making everything feel even more distant and unreal. Nathan felt helpless, standing there, not knowing what was happening behind the door. He heard people moving quickly, doctors calling for equipment, nurses speaking in rushed voices. Then silence. A nurse finally stepped out and told him that Amelia didn't make it. She had died during childbirth. Nathan didn't know how to react. His body froze, his ears started ringing, and his vision blurred. He couldn't speak, he couldn't cry. Their son had survived, but Nathan couldn't bring himself to go in and see him. He stayed in the hallway, staring at the floor, trying to breathe. His wife was gone, and everything in his life instantly lost its meaning. He never said goodbye. The funeral happened a few days later. Family and friends came, but Nathan barely noticed them. He was there, but it felt like he wasn't. He sat in the front row, staring at the casket, his hands clenched into fists. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. Amelia had been everything to him, his partner, his home, his hope for the future. Now she was in a wooden box, and there was nothing he could do. When the funeral ended, Nathan left quickly. He didn't want to talk to anyone. Back at the mansion, the silence was deafening. The house felt cold, even though the heat was on. It was full of memories, pictures on the wall, her books on the shelf, the scent of her perfume in the bedroom. But none of it brought comfort. It only made the pain sharper. Nathan avoided their room. He couldn't look at the things she left behind. Every corner of the house reminded him of what he had lost. After that day, Nathan changed. He stopped talking about Amelia completely. He didn't mention her name, and he didn't let anyone else talk about her either. If someone tried, he would just walk away or leave the room. He buried all his pain deep inside, refusing to let it show. His days became routine and empty. He woke up, worked, and went to bed. He didn't go out unless he had to. He stopped answering calls and stopped meeting with people he used to see regularly. Work became his only escape. He focused on it more than ever before, using it as a way to ignore everything else. The people around him noticed the change, but no one knew how to reach him. They could see the sadness in his eyes, but Nathan didn't let anyone in. He had built a wall around himself. He thought that if he didn't feel anything, maybe the pain would go away, but it never did. It only got heavier with time. Ethan, his newborn son, was healthy but small. He spent his first days in the hospital under careful watch. The nurses told Nathan that Ethan was quiet, that he barely cried. Nathan didn't visit. He couldn't bring himself to see the baby. He felt like looking at Ethan would only remind him of what he lost. In his mind, Amelia's death and Ethan's birth were forever linked. When Ethan was finally brought home, a nanny took care of him. Nathan didn't hold him. He didn't feed him. He stayed in his office most of the time, far away from the nursery. The baby's soft cries at night went unanswered by his father. People told Nathan he needed to be strong for Ethan, but those words didn't mean anything to him. He felt empty. He thought that Ethan deserved someone better, someone who wasn't broken. He believed that if he touched the baby, he might break him too. So, he kept his distance and said nothing. As Ethan grew older, the silence in the house remained. The boy didn't speak. At first, the doctor said it was normal. Some children just take longer to start talking, but years passed, and Ethan still didn't say a single word. Nathan never asked why. Deep down, he thought it was his fault. He believed that Ethan's silence was a reflection of his own, a punishment for not being there, for not showing love. He accepted it without question, like it was something he deserved. Every time he looked at Ethan, he saw Amelia. The boy had her eyes, her dark hair, her calm face. But there was a sadness in Ethan that Nathan could never understand. They lived in the same house but were like strangers. The nanny did most of the parenting. Nathan kept working and barely interacted with his son. The silence between them became normal. It wasn't just quiet. It was the absence of connection, of comfort, of family. Years went by, and Nathan's life stayed the same. He worked, he ate, he slept, but nothing ever changed. He never healed. The mansion aged with him, filled with dust and echoes. The photos of Amelia were gone from the walls. Her clothes were packed away. Her presence was erased, but her absence never left. Ethan continued to grow, still quiet, still distant. Nathan never tried to fix it. He thought the damage was too deep, that it was too late to be a real father. He didn't know how to talk to his son. He didn't even know if his son wanted him around. One evening, Nathan stood in the same hallway of the hospital where it all began. He had come for a routine checkup. The lights were still cold and bright. The memory of that day came back, sharp and heavy. He stood there, breathing slowly, remembering how everything had fallen apart. That moment, years ago, was still the center of his life. Nothing had ever moved forward. From the moment Ethan was born, Victoria, Nathan's mother, didn't want anything to do with him. Even before Amelia died, she had doubts about the baby. She was afraid that when the child arrived, Nathan would stop needing her. She'd always tried to keep some control over Nathan's life, and a baby meant less space for her. After Amelia's sudden death, Victoria came to live at the mansion, saying she was there to help. But it didn't feel like help. She took over everything, the house, the nursery, even decisions about Ethan's care. She told Nathan what to do and how to do it. Nathan, lost in his grief, didn't argue. He let her take control because he didn't have the strength to fight back. Victoria treated the house like it was hers again. She told people she was doing what was best for her family. But from the beginning, she never truly accepted Ethan. To her, he was a threat to her place in Nathan's life. As Ethan started to grow, his behavior didn't follow what most people expected. He was extremely quiet, barely reacted to noises or faces, and never smiled. By the time he was 3 years old, he still hadn't said a single word. Everyone started to worry, and doctors were called. After several tests, one of the doctors suggested that Ethan might be dealing with some kind of trauma, possibly caused during birth. Victoria immediately grabbed onto this explanation and repeated it to anyone who asked. She said it like a fact, as if it explained everything. Nathan accepted it too, mostly because he didn't know what else to believe. He wasn't paying close attention. He went to work, came home, and stayed in his study most of the time. He rarely asked about Ethan. Victoria said she had things under control, and Nathan didn't question her. He didn't realize that his mother was slowly building a world where she made all the rules and everyone else followed. With Nathan stepping back, Victoria handled everything related to Ethan's care. Over the years, Nathan hired 7 different nannies to help raise the boy. Each time, the new nanny arrived with hope and left just as quickly, tired and frustrated. Some were fired by Victoria for not following her strict instructions. Others quit on their own, saying the house felt tense, uncomfortable, and strange. A few even said Ethan scared them, not because he was mean, but because he was too quiet, too still. He never responded to their words, never showed affection, and barely moved during playtime. One nanny cried during her last day, saying she had tried everything and got nothing back. Another said the house felt like a place full of sadness that never went away. But in the end, the result was always the same. Ethan was left without anyone who truly connected with him. The pattern never broke, and with each goodbye, the silence in the mansion only grew stronger. Victoria didn't seem bothered when the nannies left. She often said they weren't good enough, or that they didn't understand how to raise a child like Ethan. She acted like she was protecting him, but her actions didn't feel warm or motherly. She followed routines, gave him food, scheduled appointments, but she never hugged him or showed any joy when he was near. She treated him more like a responsibility than a grandchild. At times, she even spoke about him like he was broken. Nathan didn't see these moments. He wasn't there when Victoria scolded the boy for small things, or when she ignored him for hours at a time. When Nathan asked how things were going, Victoria gave short answers and quickly changed the subject. And since Ethan never spoke or complained, Victoria stayed in control. There was no one to question her. In that house, her word became law. No one noticed how much power she held, not even Nathan, who lived in the same building. Ethan continued to grow, but the silence remained. Every day looked the same. Victoria would dress him, feed him, and leave him alone with his toys. Most days, Ethan would sit by the window, watching the outside world, but never going into it. When Nathan passed by, he sometimes stopped to look at his son, but he never stayed long. He didn't know what to say or do. The two of them barely knew each other. Nathan assumed Victoria was taking care of things, and that was enough for him. Over time, he got used to this distance. He stopped trying to change it. Ethan didn't show emotions. He didn't cry or laugh. He didn't make noise. Doctors came and left, but nothing improved. No one taught Ethan how to talk. No one helped him understand the world. He simply existed in the house, quiet and still. And in the background, Victoria continued watching everything, controlling what she could, and keeping the house exactly the way she wanted. The years passed slowly. Nathan stayed buried in his work, unable or unwilling to look closely at what was happening around him. Victoria kept running the house, claiming to protect Ethan while making every decision herself. The boy grew older but still didn't speak. His world was small, just rooms, quiet meals, and long hours of silence. The mansion, once full of potential, became a place stuck in time. People who visited didn't stay long. Most of them felt something strange they couldn't explain. Some blamed the child, others blamed the grief that still hung in the air. But the truth was that everyone had fallen into their roles. Nathan was the absent father, Victoria the strict guardian, and Ethan the silent child. Nothing changed. Nothing got better. 7 nannies came and went. No progress was made. And through it all, Victoria kept watching. From the very beginning, she had never wanted this child. And in the end, everything stayed exactly the same. Angela Davis arrived at the Cole mansion carrying only one old suitcase. Her shoes were worn from years of walking to and from jobs, and her jacket was a little too thin for the cold morning. But she walked with confidence, her shoulders straight, her eyes calm. She didn't come from money. She had no famous last name, no recommendations from powerful friends. What she had was experience. Many years spent working with children who couldn't speak, couldn't connect, or didn't want to. She had cared for kids who threw tantrums, ones who hid in closets, and others who never smiled. She had seen a lot and didn't scare easily. When she reached the front steps of the Cole mansion, she paused only for a moment before knocking. The door opened slowly. A housekeeper let her in without saying much. The first thing she noticed were the cold marble floors, the heavy air, and a deep silence that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It wasn't welcoming. Nathan Cole greeted her with a quick nod, standing at the base of the stairs with his arms crossed. His face looked tired, like he hadn't slept well in years. He didn't ask any questions, he didn't smile. He simply looked at her and said, "Keep him safe. Don't expect too much." Then he turned and walked away without another word. Angela stayed where she was, letting the silence settle before moving forward. Moments later, Victoria entered the room. She looked Angela up and down, her eyes scanning every inch of her clothing and posture. There was no kindness in her face. She didn't speak right away. Her expression made it clear she thought Angela wouldn't last. But Angela didn't flinch. She stood calmly, holding her suitcase, showing no reaction. Victoria gave a short, cold welcome and left. No one offered her tea or helped her to a room. No one showed interest in who she was. It was clear she had entered a house built on grief and control. Angela was taken to a small guest room near the back of the house. It had a single bed, a dresser and a small window that looked out over the garden. She unpacked quietly, folding her clothes and placing them into the drawers. She didn't bring much, just essentials. A few books, a notepad, comfortable shoes and some worn-out toys she had collected from past jobs, things that helped her build trust with the children she worked with. After settling in, she asked to meet Ethan. A housekeeper led her to the playroom. The door creaked open slowly. Ethan was sitting on the floor, stacking blocks into a tower. His back was straight, his face blank. He didn't look up. He didn't react to the sound of the door or the footsteps. Angela stood still for a moment, watching him. Then she quietly walked to the other side of the room and sat down, leaving a good distance between them. She didn't speak. She just sat and watched. She didn't move closer or ask him questions. She didn't call his name or try to make him talk. She didn't offer toys or force a smile. Angela just sat there, doing nothing but breathing the same air. The silence didn't bother her. In fact, she welcomed it. She had learned long ago that children like Ethan didn't respond to loud greetings or fast movements. They needed space and time, so she gave him both. She sat with her legs crossed, hands resting on her lap. She watched the blocks rise and fall in Ethan's hands. She noticed how carefully he stacked them, how quiet he was, how much focus he had. She didn't rush anything. After a while, she slowly picked up a block from a nearby pile and set it down in front of her. She didn't try to get Ethan's attention. She wasn't there to fix him. She was just there to be present, to exist next to him, without demanding anything in return. The first few days followed a similar rhythm. Angela woke up early, ate breakfast alone in the kitchen, and then made her way to the playroom. Each time she entered, Ethan was already there, always doing something quietly. One day it was blocks, another day puzzles, sometimes just sitting by the window. Angela never interrupted. She didn't treat Ethan like a problem. She respected his silence. She sat in the same spot every day, sometimes reading, sometimes doing nothing. Occasionally she would copy his movements, pick up a puzzle piece when he did, or roll a ball across the floor near him, not toward him. He never responded, but he didn't walk away either. Slowly, very slowly, the space between them felt less heavy. She never told anyone in the house what she was doing. Nathan didn't ask, and Victoria didn't care, but Angela kept showing up every single day without fail. She knew that building trust with Ethan would take time, and she had time. By the end of the first week, something small happened. Angela entered the playroom as usual and sat down. Ethan was drawing with crayons that morning, moving them across a large sheet of paper. He didn't stop when she came in, but this time, after a few minutes, he pushed the box of crayons slightly in her direction. It was barely noticeable, just a small gesture, but Angela saw it. She didn't smile or speak. She reached over and pulled one crayon from the box and began drawing on her own piece of paper. She didn't try to look at what Ethan was drawing. She stayed focused on her own space. But inside, she knew that something had shifted. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was the first sign that Ethan had noticed her. He hadn't looked at her. He hadn't said anything, but he had shared something, even if it was small. That afternoon, when she went back to her room, she sat quietly for a long time. The first seed had been planted. Angela never came in with big plans or strong demands. She didn't bring a list of strategies or try to push Ethan to speak. Instead, she moved quietly, almost like she was part of the furniture in the room. She didn't force eye contact, didn't call his name again and again, and didn't try to make him do anything. She simply existed near him. If Ethan was sitting on the floor, she might sit at the table nearby and fold laundry or organize a drawer of toys. She would sometimes read books out loud in a calm and gentle voice, but she never looked up to see if Ethan was listening. Her words were soft, like background noise, not directed at anyone. When she folded his blankets or picked up toys, she did it with care, but didn't expect thanks. At first, Ethan gave no signs, no movement, no sound, but he didn't walk away either. He stayed. And staying for a child like Ethan already meant something. Angela began to bring in new toys slowly. Nothing bright or noisy, just a few puppets with soft, silly faces and movable mouths. She didn't try to use them to talk to Ethan. She just placed them on a shelf nearby and let them stay there. Sometimes she picked one up and moved it around a little while reading or tidying the room. She didn't make the puppets speak or dance or do anything dramatic. She wanted Ethan to notice them on his own, without pressure. For a long time, he didn't. He kept playing with his blocks or sitting by the window, showing no interest. But Angela kept showing up every day. Her routine didn't change. She was always calm, always patient. One afternoon, as she sat quietly reading a book with a puppet resting on her lap, she felt something shift. She looked up briefly and saw Ethan watching her. It was only a moment, one extra second longer than usual. But it was real. That small glance was the first change. Nothing big happened after it, but Angela noticed the difference. Ethan began to look in her direction more often, not directly at her eyes, but at her hands or her movements. It was as if he was checking to see what she would do next. Sometimes he sat a little closer than before. Still no words, still no gestures, but his presence started to feel different. Less distant. Angela didn't say anything about it to anyone in the house. She just kept doing the same things, reading, folding, sitting near him. Every little thing mattered. The way she passed him crayons without looking. The way she let silence fill the space without trying to fix it. She wasn't rushing toward a goal. She was just waiting for Ethan to come forward on his own. One day, she moved the puppet a little closer to where Ethan was sitting. He didn't touch it, but he didn't move away either. That was enough. Outside of the playroom, nothing had changed. Victoria still ran the house with her usual tight control. She made sure Ethan had tea at the same time every evening. She continued giving Angela reminders about how difficult the child was. Her comments were polite but firm. "Don't get your hopes up," she would say. "He's always been like this." She didn't say it with cruelty, but her words were heavy with finality. Victoria didn't believe things would improve, and she didn't like people who did. She watched Angela from a distance, always judging but rarely interfering directly. Nathan, on the other hand, stayed mostly quiet. He watched too, from the hallway, from the stairs, through half-open doors. One afternoon, after passing by the playroom, he said quietly, "He's had good days before. Don't confuse them with progress." Angela didn't answer. She knew they didn't see what she saw. They were used to disappointment. She wasn't. She had seen enough children to know when something real had started. Angela didn't waste time arguing with Nathan or defending what she felt. She didn't care about proving anything to anyone. She focused on Ethan, and she trusted what she was seeing. She remembered other children from her past jobs, kids who had stopped speaking after losing someone, or who avoided touch because of bad memories. She had learned to tell the difference between a child who couldn't speak and one who was afraid to. With Ethan, she saw signs of defense, not disorder. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was protection. The way he watched her movements, the way he stayed when she came close, all pointed to a child who was thinking and feeling, just too scared to show it. She adjusted her pace to match his, never moving faster than he could handle. She knew the process would take time, but that was okay. Angela wasn't going anywhere. She didn't see Ethan as broken. She saw him as hurt, and hurt could heal if you gave it time. Each day brought tiny changes that were easy to miss. Ethan started to shift positions when Angela moved, sometimes even copying the way she sat. One day, he picked up the puppet and held it in his hands for a few seconds before putting it back. Angela didn't react. She didn't praise him or even smile. She let him have his moment without making it bigger than it was. She continued with her routine like nothing happened because she knew how fragile trust could be. Meanwhile, Victoria continued giving her quiet warnings. "Don't expect much," she reminded. Nathan stayed on the edge of everything, watching silently, unsure whether to hope. But Angela stayed focused. She knew what to look for. She didn't need big changes to believe in progress. That one glance from Ethan, the slight pause that day with the puppet, those were signs. Not miracles, but beginnings. Angela didn't try to break through. She observed. She moved softly, and without asking for attention, she planted the first seed. It was raining again. The soft patter of drops on the windows filled the quiet room as Angela reached into her bag and pulled out the puppets. She had used them before, but today felt different. Ethan was sitting by the window as usual, his hands resting on his lap. Angela didn't speak to him directly. She didn't try to make him join in. She just sat on the floor and started her quiet performance. The puppets had silly eyes and floppy arms. Angela gave them goofy voices, one high, one low. She made them argue over what color jelly beans taste best. She waved their arms around, let them fall over dramatically, then made them sit back up. She chuckled softly at her own story, not too loud. She didn't look at Ethan too often, just enough to know he was still in the room. Then, halfway through the story, she heard it. A small sound, a tiny laugh. She looked up. Ethan was watching. It was not a full laugh, but it was real. Just a quick, soft breath through his nose. A smile, small, almost invisible, curled briefly on Ethan's lips. Angela didn't say anything. She didn't freeze completely, but she slowed down, careful not to ruin the moment. Her heart jumped, but her face stayed calm. The puppets kept talking, kept joking. She didn't draw attention to the smile. She didn't want Ethan to feel pressured. Instead, she acted as if it had always been part of the day. Inside, though, everything had changed. That moment proved something. He was listening, he was paying attention, and most importantly, he felt something. It was a breakthrough, even if it didn't come with words. Ethan stayed where he was, still quiet, but his eyes didn't leave the puppets. Angela ended the story gently and put the puppets back in her bag without any kind of celebration. She didn't mention the smile. She didn't need to. She knew what she saw. The next day, Angela followed her usual routine. She entered the playroom at the same time and gave Ethan space. He was sitting on the floor again, pushing a small toy car back and forth. Angela pulled out the puppets like always, placing them on the rug near her. She didn't start the performance immediately. She let them rest in plain view while she arranged some books on the shelf. Then it happened. Ethan leaned forward slowly and touched one of the puppets. Just a single finger on the puppet's fabric mouth, but it was deliberate. Angela kept her back turned for a moment longer, pretending not to notice. When she finally sat down, she saw Ethan still touching the puppet. She didn't speak. She picked up a different puppet and began telling another short story, simple and calm. Ethan didn't laugh this time, but he watched every movement. From that day on, their time together felt different. They had found something that connected them, a silent rhythm. Each afternoon they met in the playroom, and the puppets became part of their shared time. Ethan didn't talk, but he began reacting more, sometimes by moving closer, sometimes by choosing which puppet Angela should use just by touching it or sliding it across the floor toward her. Angela learned his signals quickly. A glance meant interest. A shift in posture meant discomfort. She respected every message, never asking for more than he gave. Their play became a pattern. Angela told stories, and Ethan watched with quiet attention. He started mimicking small movements, like tilting his head when the puppet tilted its head, or tapping his fingers along with the puppet's rhythm. These were small things, but in a world where silence had ruled for years, they meant everything. The air between them grew lighter. The tension in Ethan's body softened. Angela never pushed for words. She let the silence be what it was, not empty, just quiet. They didn't speak, but something between them did. Victoria noticed. She had always watched from a distance, checking in with short comments and strict routines. But now, something in her shifted. She became more involved, not with warmth, but with more control. The tea for Ethan, which had once been a gentle part of the evening, returned with strict timing and a sense of urgency. Angela noticed how Victoria's tone changed when she spoke to the boy, more clipped and firm. She reminded Ethan, not kindly, to drink every last drop. She told Angela in passing not to undo years of care with silly games. Angela said nothing in response, but she paid attention. Victoria began to appear at the door more often during playtime, arms crossed, watching. The tension in the house slowly returned, not from Ethan, but from the people around him. Nathan stayed quiet as always, offering no opinion. Angela started feeling something in the air. It wasn't just skepticism now. Something else was rising, something quiet, but it felt off. Angela couldn't name the feeling exactly, but it made her more cautious. She started paying attention to details she had ignored before. How the housekeeper avoided eye contact, how Ethan stiffened when Victoria came near, how the tea became a rule instead of a comfort. Angela never said anything aloud, but she watched. She adjusted her timing, keeping sessions light and short when Victoria was near. She made notes in her journal each night, recording Ethan's small changes and the growing pressure around them. But she didn't stop. She still pulled out the puppets. She still told stories, and Ethan still responded. Each day his interest grew. His smile returned once or twice, small, brief, but real. They didn't need words. Their rhythm stayed silent, but warm and alive. Angela felt proud of that. Even if the house around them was cold, even if something didn't feel right, what they shared felt real. It was raining again when she pulled out the puppets, and Ethan smiled. Some mornings, Ethan was completely different. He would wake up more alert, with his eyes wide open, and he moved with energy. During puppet time, he would laugh softly or tap his fingers along with the story. He even started choosing which puppet Angela should use by pointing or placing one in her lap. These days felt like progress, but not every day was like that. On other mornings, Ethan walked slower, dragged his feet, and looked like he hadn't slept well. His eyes seemed empty, like he was looking through things instead of at them. He barely responded, barely moved. Angela started writing everything down. She tracked what Ethan ate when he went to sleep and how he acted the next morning. The more she recorded, the more she noticed a clear pattern. On the nights when Ethan drank the tea from Victoria, the next morning was always bad. He was dull, quiet, and distant again. It wasn't just sleepiness. It was like someone had dimmed his light. Angela became more careful with the evening routine. One night, instead of allowing the housekeeper to give Ethan the usual tea, she prepared a cup of warm milk herself. She kept her voice casual and told Victoria that Ethan seemed cold and might enjoy something different. The housekeeper hesitated, but eventually handed the milk to Ethan without protest. Angela watched closely. He drank it slowly, and then went to bed without complaint. The next morning, everything was different. Ethan was awake early. His eyes were focused. During playtime, he smiled and laughed through the entire puppet show. He even made one puppet tap the floor twice, a little sign of interaction. It wasn't random. Angela knew what she was seeing. She waited all day, watched for signs of tiredness or withdrawal, but there were none. It was his best day in weeks. That evening, Angela asked Nathan a question she had been holding back. "What's in the tea?" Nathan shrugged and said, "Just mild sleep aids. Nothing serious." She knew children. She had worked with many over the years. Kids who couldn't speak, kids who couldn't sit still, and kids who had been through things no one wanted to talk about. And none of them looked like Ethan did after drinking that tea. This wasn't normal drowsiness. It was something deeper, like he was being pulled down into a fog that lasted for hours. Angela replayed the details over and over in her head. Victoria was always the one insisting on the tea. She said it helped Ethan sleep and kept him calm. But calm wasn't the goal. Connection was. Growth was. Ethan didn't need to be quiet. He needed to be understood. Angela started skipping the tea more often, giving warm milk instead and pretending it was the same. On those mornings, Ethan smiled. On tea nights, the fog returned. Angela didn't say anything out loud, but inside, her worry started growing into something bigger. Meanwhile, Victoria's behavior changed as well. She noticed the difference in Ethan, how he was more active on some mornings, and it seemed to bother her. She didn't say anything directly, but her presence became heavier. She started watching Angela more closely. Her smiles were still there, but they felt stiff and forced. She asked more questions about the play sessions, but not in a curious way, more like someone waiting for a mistake. One afternoon, after a particularly joyful puppet show where Ethan clapped softly for the first time, Victoria pulled Angela aside. Her tone was cold. "Don't get too excited," she said. "These children burn out quickly." Angela didn't respond. She nodded politely and walked away. But inside, she was boiling. Burnout? Ethan was not a flame to be watched disappear. He was a child. A quiet one, yes, but not broken. Angela knew something was wrong in the house, and the more she saw, the more she realized that silence had been hiding too much. Nathan remained distant. He never questioned Victoria. He never watched the play sessions. When Angela brought up Ethan's behavior again, Nathan gave the same answer. He needs rest, that's all. If the tea helps, let it help. He didn't see the problem. He didn't notice how much better Ethan was without it. Angela wanted to push harder, to make him see, but she could tell he wasn't ready to hear it. Victoria had been in charge for too long, and Nathan had stopped asking questions years ago. Angela decided to stay quiet for now, on the outside. But inside, she was making a plan. She began keeping a detailed journal, times, dates, behaviors, food, reactions. Everything was written down. If no one else was going to speak up for Ethan, she would. She wouldn't confront Victoria without proof. She knew how quickly she could be removed from the house if she spoke too soon. But she also knew one thing for sure. Something was not right, and she was done pretending. Angela had seen too many families ignore signs. She had seen what happened when children were treated like problems instead of people. Ethan didn't speak, but he felt everything, and now Angela felt it too. The fog in his eyes, the change in his energy, the way Victoria hovered, it was all connected. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Each day, she worked carefully, building Ethan's trust and gathering information. She waited for the right moment, but she stayed alert. She knew she had to be smart. She couldn't just accuse. She needed to protect Ethan without giving Victoria a reason to push her out. Angela had no legal power, no family name to back her, but she had something stronger. She cared, and she paid attention. She watched the house, the routines, the expressions, and especially Ethan. If no one else was going to protect him, she would. Some days Ethan was bright. Some days he was foggy. And now Angela understood exactly why. It was a clear morning. The sky outside was bright blue, without clouds. Sunlight came in through the tall windows, lighting up the playroom. The rays of light landed across the carpet, making patterns on the floor. Angela had opened the curtains earlier, wanting to let the room feel more alive. Ethan was already there, sitting on the rug with his legs crossed. Around them were soft puppets, some lying on their sides, some still standing upright after the last story they acted out. Angela picked up one with a big nose and named it Captain Sniff. She gave it a deep voice and made it argue with another puppet named Cecily Ears. Ethan let out a quiet laugh. Then, slowly, he reached for a puppet of his own, one with soft green fabric and tiny button eyes. He lifted it. Angela kept talking in her puppet voice, not pushing. She let the moment happen naturally. Ethan looked at her. His lips moved. Mommy. She blinked, stunned by the sound. The word had been soft, broken into pieces, but she heard it clearly. Ethan had never spoken a word before, not a single one. But now, here he was, looking directly at her, holding a puppet and saying a word. Not just any word, but that word. Angela's eyes began to fill with tears. She leaned in gently, careful not to move too quickly and scare him. "What did you say, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled, a real smile, not a short flicker, but one that held for several seconds. And then, with confidence this time, he repeated it, "Mommy." The room felt still. Angela didn't know if she should cry, laugh, or both. She just nodded, eyes wide, heart pounding. In that moment, the months of quiet, the slow progress, the careful steps, it all led to this. Ethan had found a word. And that word was mommy. He was dressed for work, briefcase in hand, coat over his arm. He had come in to say goodbye like he did most mornings. Usually, he didn't linger. But this time, he stepped inside, just as Ethan said the word again. Nathan stopped immediately, frozen. His hand opened. The briefcase hit the floor with a loud thud. Angela turned to face him, her eyes still wet with tears. Nathan's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out at first. Finally, his voice cracked. "Did he just—" Angela nodded slowly, smiling. Her hands shook. "He said it. Twice," she replied, barely able to speak herself. Nathan dropped to his knees, eyes locked on Ethan. He looked overwhelmed, like his mind couldn't catch up with what he had just seen and heard. Ethan looked at him and smiled again, holding up the puppet. Nathan didn't speak. He just stayed there, eyes wide, breath shaky. The moment didn't feel real, but it was. Angela reached out slowly and put her hand on Nathan's shoulder. He didn't move for a second, but then he turned his head toward her, still speechless. He wasn't crying, but his eyes were wet. "How?" he asked softly. Angela didn't have an answer, not a full one at least. "He was ready," she said. "He just needed space and safety." Nathan looked back at Ethan. The boy was still sitting calmly, his puppet now resting in his lap. He didn't look confused or afraid. He looked proud, like he had done something important, even if he didn't fully understand how powerful it was. Nathan moved closer to Ethan and sat directly in front of him. Slowly, carefully, he opened his arms. He didn't say anything. He just waited. Ethan blinked once, then leaned forward and placed his forehead gently against Nathan's chest. Nathan closed his eyes and exhaled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But for both of them, it was the beginning of something new. Neither of them noticed the figure standing behind them at first. In the doorway, barely a step inside, was Victoria. She was holding a small porcelain teacup, the kind she always used. Her fingers gripped the handle tightly. Her face was pale, her eyes locked onto Ethan, unblinking. She hadn't expected this. No one had. The words she had just heard cut through her like a knife. "Mommy!" It wasn't for her. It wasn't about her. In fact, it replaced her. Victoria had spent years controlling that house, controlling Ethan's world, deciding what was best for everyone. Now, in one word, it felt like all that power had slipped out of her hands. Her hand trembled, the teacup cracked. A thin line spread from the rim to the base. She held it tighter, trying not to show weakness, but her knuckles turned white. Angela saw her and said nothing. Nathan didn't look back. Ethan stayed in his father's arms, and Victoria stood there still, finally, silent. Victoria slowly stepped back from the doorway, not saying a word. Her cracked teacup was still in her hand, and a thin drop of tea ran down her wrist. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes told a different story. For the first time in years, something had changed, and it was not under her control. Angela stayed where she was, still sitting on the rug, watching over Ethan. Her heart was still racing. She knew this moment would stay with her forever. Nathan looked down at his son, brushing his hair back gently. Ethan leaned into his father's chest and closed his eyes. There were no more words. None were needed. Angela looked at Ethan and whispered, "You're safe." She meant every syllable. She had worked for this moment, believed in it even when no one else did. The silence had finally broken, and in that room, filled with sunlight, a little boy had chosen to speak. Behind them, Victoria stood, clutching a teacup so tightly it cracked in her hand. Ethan had started to say more words. It didn't happen all at once, but each day something new would come out of his mouth. Soft, a little unsure, but clear. One morning, he pointed to the puppet with long arms and said, "Hug." Later, during story time, he whispered "puppet" when he wanted Angela to begin. At lunch, he pointed to the cup in front of him and said "blue." They weren't full sentences, but each word felt like a miracle. Angela didn't make a big deal out of them in front of Ethan, but every time she wrote it down in her notebook. Nathan noticed too. He started to spend more time with Ethan. He didn't always know what to say, but he sat with him, sometimes even joined puppet time. For the first time in years, Nathan started to believe that things could really get better. Angela was proud, but she stayed cautious. Progress brought attention. And attention, especially from Victoria, always came with pressure. Angela began noticing that Victoria was more involved again. She showed up during play sessions and stood nearby, pretending to be reading or sipping tea. But Angela saw how closely she watched. Victoria kept repeating the word routine, like a rule. She pushed harder for the bedtime tea. He needs it. He sleeps better with it. Children thrive on routine, she said. But Ethan had started refusing the tea. Some nights he turned his face away from the cup and didn't touch it. Angela didn't push. She let him choose. But Victoria didn't let it go. She insisted. She sat across from him and gently pushed the cup forward, again and again. Her tone was sweet, but Angela could feel the tension building underneath. When Ethan didn't drink it, Victoria's smile became tighter. She started telling Angela that if he regressed, it would be on her. Angela didn't respond, but the feeling in her chest was growing heavier. Something wasn't right. Victoria wasn't just concerned, she was panicking. One evening, after dinner, Angela saw Victoria walking toward the kitchen with the teapot in her hand. The house was quiet. Ethan was upstairs with a book, and Nathan had stepped out for a call. Angela followed silently, staying far enough back to not be noticed. From the hallway, she peeked into the kitchen. Victoria didn't see her. She was standing by the stove, unscrewing the lid of a small glass vial and pouring something into the teapot. The vial had no label, no brand, nothing written on it. It was small enough to hide easily. Angela's heart started to pound. She leaned in slightly, trying to get a better look, but stayed out of sight. Victoria finished what she was doing and left the kitchen, humming softly. Angela waited until the hallway was clear, then stepped inside. The teapot was still warm. She looked around. The vial was still there, sitting next to the kettle, no label. She picked it up and sniffed it. The smell was bitter, chemical. Angela's hands trembled as she slipped the vial into her pocket. She didn't know exactly what it was, but she knew it didn't belong anywhere near a child's drink. Her mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was this why Ethan had those groggy mornings? Was this why he had been trapped in silence for so long? Angela didn't sleep that night. She stayed in her room, sitting at the edge of the bed, holding the vial in her hand, staring at it. Everything started to make sense. The heavy fog in Ethan's eyes, the routine Victoria protected so fiercely, the resistance when he started to get better. Angela thought back to every nanny who had come and gone. Every time Victoria said Ethan was too difficult, and every time she insisted on full control. This wasn't just about rules or structure. Something harmful had been happening in this house for a long time. And no one had stopped it until now. The next morning, Angela didn't say anything to Nathan. Not yet. She wanted to be sure. She placed the vial deep inside her dresser, hidden under her clothes, and went about the day as normal. Ethan was happy. He said the word ball when she rolled it to him and bye when she stepped out for a moment. Victoria acted like nothing had changed. She returned to her cold smiles, quiet comments, and endless talk about structure. But Angela was watching everything now with new eyes. Every movement, every interaction, every cup of tea was under her microscope. She even pretended to make the tea herself one evening, just to avoid letting Victoria near it. At night, when everyone was asleep, Angela researched what could cause symptoms like Ethan's. She looked up substances with bitter smells and no taste. Her stomach turned at what she found, but it only confirmed her suspicion. This was not about care. It was about control, and Angela wasn't going to allow it anymore. She didn't know yet how she would prove everything. She had no lab, no medical support, no one on her side, except a child who had just begun to speak. But Angela had something else, the truth. She had the records she kept, the changes in Ethan's behavior, the moments of clarity when he avoided the tea, the fog when he didn't. And now she had the vial. That was enough to start. She planned her steps carefully. She couldn't move too fast. If Victoria found out, she might disappear the evidence. She might remove Angela. She might do something worse. So Angela played the part. Quiet, helpful, calm. But every hour she watched. Every night she stayed alert. The ground was shifting beneath the house. Something terrible had been happening in this place, and Angela was done being silent about it. One evening in the same kitchen, she had seen it with her own eyes. She had smelled it. And now she was ready to uncover it. Angela didn't waste time. Early the next morning, after hiding the vial carefully in her coat pocket, she left the mansion without saying where she was going. She walked down the main road and took a bus into town. When she arrived, she found a small local pharmacy, not the usual kind with aisles of snacks and magazines, but a quieter one, with an older man behind the counter who looked like he'd seen a lot in his time. She explained she wasn't asking for medication, but needed help identifying a substance. She placed the vial on the counter. The man looked at it, then gave her a serious look. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Angela didn't explain. She just said it had been given to a child and asked him to test it. He made a few calls, took a sample, and returned an hour later with an answer. It was a powerful sedative, usually meant for adults. Used incorrectly, it could suppress speech and movement. Angela felt sick. She had suspected something, but hearing the pharmacist say it out loud made it real. This wasn't just herbal tea or something harmless to help a child sleep. This was something designed to quiet a person, not just physically but mentally, and it had been given to Ethan, likely for years. She thanked the pharmacist, took the vial, and headed straight back to the mansion. The bus ride felt slow. Her fingers kept curling around the vial in her pocket. She couldn't stop thinking about all the days Ethan had looked empty, all the mornings he stared at the wall or couldn't keep his head up. When she finally got back, she didn't hesitate. She went straight to Nathan's study. He was reading over some papers when she walked in. Angela placed the vial on his desk. "This is in the tea your mother gives Ethan," she said. Nathan looked confused at first, then frustrated. "She wouldn't. She's been helping us." "She cares." She didn't try to change his mind with emotion. She opened her notebook and laid out the facts, date after date, behavior after behavior, all matching the times Ethan drank the tea. She showed Nathan the difference in his son's energy on the days without tea. She told him what the pharmacist said. As she spoke, Nathan's face slowly changed. The anger in his voice disappeared. His hands trembled. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the vial, eyes wide. "This can't be real," he said quietly. But the disbelief was gone. He had seen it too. The change in Ethan. The signs were always there. He had just refused to see them. He closed his eyes and for a moment said nothing. Then he stood up. "Where is she?" he asked. Angela told him Victoria was upstairs as usual. Nathan left the room without another word. He walked slowly, but with purpose, each step heavier than the last. Angela stayed behind, heart pounding. Victoria was in her sitting room, pouring herself tea like nothing had changed. Nathan didn't knock. He walked in and stood still, holding the vial in his hand. "What is this?" he asked. Victoria didn't look surprised. She glanced at the bottle, then back at her son. "You already know," she said, setting her cup down. Nathan's voice shook. "You've been drugging him." Victoria stood up calmly. "He was never supposed to speak. That boy took everything from me. My son. My peace." Nathan stared at her, eyes wide with disbelief and pain. "You robbed him of years," he whispered, his voice cracked. Victoria didn't flinch. "You gave up when Amelia died. Someone had to take charge. I did what had to be done." Her words were cold, emotionless. She turned away, as if the conversation was finished. But Nathan didn't move. The betrayal hit him like a weight. The silence between them lasted longer than anything they'd ever shared. For the first time, Victoria looked afraid, because she had been caught. Nathan walked out of the room without another word. His mind felt like it was splitting in two. He had trusted his mother, even when he had doubts. He had let her control so much of Ethan's life. And now he knew that every step forward his son could have taken had been stolen, day by day, sip by sip. He made his way to the playroom where Ethan sat quietly with a book in his lap. The boy looked up and gave a small smile, the kind that still surprised Nathan. Nathan didn't speak right away. He knelt down slowly and reached out. Ethan leaned into him without hesitation. Nathan wrapped his arms around him and held him tightly. "I'm sorry, son," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He didn't try to explain. He didn't make excuses. He just held Ethan close and let himself feel every ounce of guilt, sadness, and rage that had been building inside him. It was too late to undo the past, but not to protect the future. Angela stood at the hallway entrance, watching the scene quietly. She didn't interrupt. She let them have the moment they needed. Her chest felt tight, not just with sadness, but with relief. The truth was out now. There was still a long way to go, but the poison had been exposed and the lies had started to crumble. Victoria did not come out of her room. The rest of the day passed quietly. No tea was served that night. Nathan stayed with Ethan, helping him with dinner, listening when he pointed to things and named them in his soft voice. Angela stayed close but gave them space. Later that night, as the mansion grew quiet, Angela checked the drawer where she had hidden her notes. She didn't need them anymore to convince Nathan, but she might need them to keep Victoria away for good. A new chapter had begun, and it all started when she brought that vial back to the house. The secret poison finally revealed. Victoria was sent away quietly. There was no police, no lawyers, no dramatic goodbye. Nathan handled everything in private. He didn't want news to spread. He didn't want the town asking questions, and he didn't want Ethan growing up with more chaos. But he made sure of one thing: Victoria would never come back. He arranged for her to move in with distant relatives out of state. No phone calls, no visits. He explained only the necessary details to the staff, who were smart enough not to ask too much. When she left the mansion, she didn't say goodbye to Ethan. She didn't look back. Nathan stood by the front door as the car pulled away, arms crossed, face blank. Angela stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder. Ethan wasn't told anything. He simply noticed, over the next few days, that no more tea arrived, no more footsteps followed him through the hall, and no more cold stares waited from the end of the hallway. She was gone. The changes in Ethan came fast. Within a week, he was smiling more. He laughed at the puppets again, but now even started making voices of his own. One morning, while coloring, he looked at a picture he had drawn and said, "Blue sky, happy." Angela almost dropped her coffee. She wrote it down like she always did, but now her notebook was full of words, not just notes about silence. Nathan watched in quiet amazement. He often sat nearby, pretending to read, but listening to every word Ethan spoke. The boy who once avoided eye contact now pointed at things, said their names, and even started asking small questions. "Where ball? Why dogs sleep?" The house felt lighter. Ethan ran through the hallways, sometimes pretending to fly. Mealtimes became filled with sounds. Chewing, humming, even talking. Nathan and Angela didn't interrupt his flow. They just followed along. It was like Ethan had been waiting his whole life to speak, and now that he could, he didn't want to stop. He still called Angela Mommy. The first time he said it, weeks ago, Angela had frozen. She thought it was a one-time moment, a slip, maybe even confusion. But he kept saying it. He said it when he was scared, when he was happy, when he wanted her attention. Nathan heard it too, and at first it caught him off guard, but he never corrected it. Not once. In fact, the first time Ethan said, "Mommy, come play," Nathan looked at Angela and gave a small, quiet nod. It wasn't a conversation they had. It didn't need to be. Ethan had chosen. Angela never tried to explain it. She just kept caring for him, guiding him, loving him the way he needed. The title came naturally. The bond was real. Nathan and Angela became a team, not just for Ethan, but for each other. Every part of their day, from brushing teeth to bedtime stories, became a routine filled with warmth, laughter, and now, real communication. One evening, Nathan and Angela sat together on the back porch. It was a simple moment. They were both holding cups of tea, but now it was harmless, just chamomile, no secrets. The garden stretched out in front of them, filled with late spring flowers. Ethan ran in circles across the grass, pretending to chase a butterfly. His bare feet hit the dirt. His voice rose and fell with giggles. Nathan watched him for a while and then said softly, "He wasn't broken." Angela looked at him, surprised by the sudden words. He continued, "We just didn't protect him." He stared ahead, eyes following Ethan's movements. Angela nodded slowly. "But now he's free," she said. They didn't say much after that. They just sat in silence, both watching the same little boy they had once feared might never speak, never laugh, never connect. He was alive now, fully. And not because of medicine or therapy or miracle. He was thriving because the fear around him had finally ended. Months passed. Summer turned into fall. Angela and Nathan enrolled Ethan in a small private school known for supporting kids with learning differences. The teachers were kind, the classrooms quiet, and the playground huge. At first, Ethan was nervous. He didn't like crowds or loud noises, but the school gave him space, and day by day he adjusted. He made friends slowly, one boy who liked dinosaurs, one girl who loved puppets. Angela volunteered at the school twice a week, helping in the classroom. Nathan helped with pickup when he could. Then came school presentation day. Each child was supposed to share something they loved. When it was Ethan's turn, he stood on the small stage with his green puppet in hand. He looked out nervously, then spotted Angela and Nathan sitting together. That gave him courage. He lifted the puppet high and said clearly, "My name is Ethan. This is my puppet. I like stories." The room clapped. Angela wiped her eyes. Nathan held her hand tightly. After the event, parents and kids mingled around the schoolyard. One woman, a teacher's aide, crouched beside Ethan with a kind smile. "And who's this?" she asked, pointing to Angela, who stood nearby. Ethan looked up at Angela, then back at the woman. His answer was clear, loud, and proud. "That's my mommy," he said. The woman smiled and nodded. Angela stood still for a second, then bent down and wrapped her arms around Ethan, holding him tightly. Nathan stood beside them, his hand resting gently on Ethan's shoulder. No one corrected the boy. No one needed to. Angela had earned the name not by asking for it, but by being there every moment, protecting him, believing in him, and never giving up. The days of silence, of fog, of fear, they were behind them now. Ethan had found his voice, and more importantly, he had found a family who heard it. No more secrets, no more poison, just life, real, loud, messy, and full of love. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe until next time.